Toronto is our friendly neighbor on the Ontario Lake. Did you know that Toronto is known for its participation in the Underground Railroad, and it offered freedom to slaves?
I'm Jon Haggins, a GlobeTrotter. I'm here in Toronto. This is a very special treat. Stay tuned within the next few minutes and you're going to share some of the glories of Toronto.
The Fairmont Royal York Hotel is old elegance.
My name is Michelle Simpson. I work with Tourism Toronto. I'm very proud of my city. Toronto is one of those very vibrant, very creative cities. I'm often very surprised at people who travel the world and come to our city, and how surprised they are at how diverse and how very multicultural and how very eclectic our city is. There's nothing in the city that you can't do. There's nothing in the city that you can't find. And for us, that's a great way to entice people to come to our city and enjoy our city. If you really like the museum scene, if you like a culinary scene, or if you like major attractions, we have it here. We've got the theater, we've got the live music.
The railway station sits across the street from the Royal York Fairmont Hotel, which makes everything so convenient. The view from the top of the tower is so spectacular. You can see the entire city and the Ontario Lake. The highest sphere in Toronto is the Toronto Tower, where we dine on the best international cuisine.
Because we're only really discovering this ourselves, that this was the homestead, for 50 years, Thornton and Lucy Blackburn, this was their home. This was very much the cultural center of our black heritage, beginning as far back as 1832, he arrived, and he started up his own taxi cab. He was the very first taxi cab service here in Toronto. I mean, he was the owner of it. And through that, he amassed a lot of money. They built a beautiful home right here. And this was when people were escaping on the Underground Railroad and the black slaves were coming. They welcomed them here. This was very much a welcoming home to those people in the very beginnings of the black culture experience here in Toronto. So again, the Blackburns get 2 plaques. They get a Freedom Trail plaque, and they also get a National Historic Site. There's only really a handful of buildings in Toronto that actually get both of these plaques, and that it means something to the history of our country. And it was only in 1985 that they discovered that this was the homestead. For most of the 20th century, this area that we're in, Corktown as they call it, was the old Irish working class slum, really, and then it became very industrialized. So for 100 years this site was, everywhere around it was the old gasworks of Toronto, and then they built the school on top of the old Thornton Blackburn estate. So it was all forgotten until 1985, when they started to realize this is where it all began, right here on this very spot. So here we are at George Brown's home. George Brown was one of the fathers of Confederation, meaning that he was one of the founding fathers of the modern nation of Canada, but he was also very much at the forefront of the abolitionist movement, and that's why his home gets a Underground Railroad Freedom Trail plaque, because he also gets a National Historic Site plaque. In Canada, a red plaque outside a building means that it has something to do with the history of Canada. So George Brown was also the not just the abolitionist leader in his newspaper. He had a newspaper called The Globe, which today is the Globe and Mail, Canada's national newspaper. He was always writing on the need for us as Canadians to do more to end slavery in America, to really support a lot of the slaves that were, escaping from America, to come here and, to look after them, to make sure that they felt welcome here. So he was he was assassinated. He was shot in his office in 1880. One of his employees came in one day and said, "You know what? I never liked you. and shoots him in the leg, and he goes, oh! So they bring him back to his home here, and he just suffered for 2 weeks, and then he died.
What a difference a day made. 24 little hours, but the sun and the flowers, where there used to be rain, my yesterday was through, dear. Now I'm a part of you, dear. My lonely nights are through, dear. Lord, since you said you were mine, Lord, what a difference a day made. There's a rainbow before me, skies above won't be stormy, no, 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 no. Lord, since that moment of bliss, chilling with a kiss, it's heaven when you find romance on your menu. What a difference day made, Lord, and that difference is you. I think they're gonna help me out.
So here we are at St. Lawrence Hall here in downtown Toronto. This building opened in 1850, and it was very much at the very center of our black heritage. In Canada, when you see a dark blue plaque with this symbol, it means that it's part of our black culture. And the slaves from America were always, told to follow the North Star, and that would lead them to freedom, which would lead them to Canada. So St. Lawrence Hall was very much at the center of that early black culture. And the very first person to speak here on opening night of the Great Hall upstairs on April 1st, 1851, was Frederick Douglass. So here we are in the grand ballroom of St. Lawrence Hall up on the 3rd floor. This is where Frederick Douglass spoke many times on the evils of slavery, and also too in Canadian history, one of our great abolitionists was a man named George Brown. And George Brown, today there's a university named George Brown College after him. He was also the editor of the Globe newspaper, which today is Canada's national newspaper, the Globe and Mail. So John A. Macdonald and his group, there were about 36 men who would get together. They're known as Fathers of Confederation. Much like in America, you have your founding fathers, we have Fathers of Confederation. And they used to all meet in this room also to tell the citizens of Toronto that, Canada must become its own independent nation. So this room was political, a lot of anti-slavery speeches, but it was also a ballroom for opera and theater.
I'm David Whitaker, the President and CEO of Tourism Toronto. I want to take this opportunity to welcome all of our viewers to a very special exhibit that we're doing this evening here at the legendary St. Lawrence Hall, celebrating Black history here in Toronto and here in Canada. We have our own unique story to tell. Very similar to the experiences that more people in New York perhaps are known in the United States, but Toronto, part of whether it was the last stop on the Underground Railroad or some of the amazing things that have accomplished in this community, the sacrifices and commitments of others. This exhibit helps capture a very special period, the first 50 years of last century, and we're using this evening as a backdrop to celebrating the diversity that we in Toronto are so proud of. We're also a major leisure vacation destination for many consumers, and so we want to help educate people about what's relevant and what's happening in Toronto today.
I'm Jon Haggins, the GlobeTrotter. I'm here in Toronto. Toronto is one of those hidden secrets that's really a skip away from home. I love it. The luxury hotels, the sights, the attractions, the great cuisine. It's a fantastic place to visit, and I can't wait to return. Until next week, I'm Jon Haggins. I hope to see you next week at another great destination. Remember, get up, get out, and travel!